didn't get the memo.
What would Mr. Rogers think about you and your legacy in Florida? Taking away health insurance with people with pre-existing conditions, Sam Bondi. Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
So that's the video of Bondi leaving the theater. So that's what they wanted. But as she came in, she and her boyfriend were verbally assaulted and physically threatened in the concessions line.
They came up again, just every curse word in the book, and they said to him, "Hey, Blue Eyes, come on, aren't you going to protect her?" Using a lot of, a lot of other words too. "Aren't you going to protect her? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" And they're this far from my face. One spit on my head. They were trying to create a fight.
Oh, you bet they were. And if this continues, somebody's going to get hurt. Now, imagine if a few years ago, Obama administration officials, or just run-of-the-mill local Democrats, were harassed and verbally assaulted in that way. There would be calls for the National Guard to step in. But since conservatives are being targeted, all bets are off. All standards are out the window. This is all evolving into a type of domestic terrorism, and it's only going to get worse. Homeland Security Chief, remember Kirstjen Nielsen, was driven out of a Mexican restaurant in D.C. last week by angry protesters. White House senior advisor Stephen Miller was also reportedly heckled at a D.C. eatery, and tonight protesters are reportedly staked outside of his apartment building. They even staged a protest outside of Nielsen's home, blaring audio of this child separation at a border facility. These are anarchic, organized spectacles. They're no accident. Each flash protest is planned out and choreographed. It's planned online first, again, and it's meant to shame the political opponent, to stoke violence and hatred, and maybe even intimidate people in the future from getting involved in the Trump administration at all. Why would they want that hassle? Then at a weekend rally, this is the best, Congresswoman Maxine Waters issued her own very soft call to action.
The American people have put up with this president long enough. Yeah! What more do we need to see? What more lies do we need to hear? You see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them.
We're going to be talking about that phrase, push back on them, in just a moment. We invited Ms. Waters and a number of Democrats to appear tonight. No surprise, they all refused. She did find time to go on MSNBC tonight and Sunday to share this unifying message.
And I want to tell you, for these members of his cabinet who remain and try to defend him, they're not going to be able to go to a restaurant. They're not going to be able to stop at a gas station. They're not going to be able to shop at a department store. The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're going to absolutely harass them until they decide that they're going to tell the president, no, I can't hang with you.
Harass them, approach them, drive them out, push them back. So is Maxine Waters fomenting violence and using her position as a member of Congress to do so? Well, frankly, I said this today on radio. Paul Ryan should at the very least open an ethics inquiry into Waters' rhetoric. And I think they should move to censure her. She seems to be using her office to foment, or at least justify, acts of harassment, intimidation that could very well lead to violence. Now, reactions of outrage from the White House to Nancy Pelosi forced Waters to the microphone today. But if Maxine Waters thinks a non-apology double talk 48 hours after her incendiary and outrageous statements that she repeated yesterday are sufficient to quell the firestorm, she has another thing coming.
There's nowhere in my statement, anytime, any place that we talked about harm. And so our members of the Democratic caucus are talking about civility, and that makes good sense. But protest is civility.
Drive them out, harass them, get right up in their face, all the things that people take away from what she said in her very words. So threatening women and children at a dinner Oh, at the movies is civil, Maxine? No wonder why she's too afraid to come on. She'll only go on to the softball interviews on MSNBC. Maybe she should come on a show she can't intimidate. Let's be clear. She knew exactly what she was saying, and she did not apologize for her comments in the least. The woman has been saying crazy, hateful, incendiary things for years. And the difference now is the entire Democratic Party has drifted into Maxine land.
As far as I'm concerned, the Tea Party can go straight to hell. I don't honor him, I don't respect him, and I don't want to be involved with it. The American people had better understand what's going on. This is a bunch of scumbags. Let's impeach 45! Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
The left wants to cry targeting people, maliciously attacking them in public for their beliefs or lifestyles. But now, because conservatives are the targets, a new standard has emerged. Since they believe Trump's policies are detestable, Nazi-like, the left believes it's a by any means necessary scenario. So they attempt to justify their thuggish public bullying by blaming whom? Trump, of course.
Should someone who lies constantly and enables the president's lies be openly welcomed in society wherever they please?
I would say that the polite discourse is inappropriate when there are babies in cages. Now, does that mean that we're going to be violent? No. But does that mean that Sarah Sanders can have a nice, quiet dinner with her family when she's taking our tax dollars to implement this policy? I don't think so.
It wasn't until we had 3-year-olds in cages that these people could go into public. Too bad on them.
But this vulgarity that exists, represented primarily right now, pushed by the president, but now coursed on either side of the aisle, has made it much worse and much harder to do anything in this country.
Oh, spare me. For decades, Hollywood and the left have driven any semblance of decency and civility from the movie house as well as a lecture hall. They've cheapened everything from music to fashion, but Trump is to blame for the vulgarity of the culture? Nice try. Our politics are now devoid of conversation, debate, ideas. The left has created a political culture where demonization of opponents and boycotts are routine. Hey, if you can't debate them, can't beat them in a debate, try to shut them down altogether. Organized chaos is their favorite tool. Yes, it's very Alinskyite. But the idea is not to come to some common understanding or even win an argument, of course, but to destroy political opponents. And you bet, attempt to silence them. When Democrats are urging uprisings online to deny Republican women safe havens, peace, just having a dinner in private, in a public place, a moment of enjoyment for her family, they won't allow that? Something is deeply wrong. Now is the moment for all people, right and left, to condemn this uncivil disobedience and those advocating for it. Threatening, yelling, and haranguing officials in public, that's not going to create positive outcomes or a better policy. Even Chuck Schumer said that today. Good for him. It will only harden the political divide in this country and perhaps lead to violence. And any blood spilled, remember what happened a year ago to Steve Scalise? Any blood spilled will be on the hands of Maxine Waters and any Democrats or never-Trumpers condoning tacitly or explicitly these Antifa-style tactics of vicious intimidation. And we will not stand for that. And that's the angle. All right, let's discuss with my first guest, Monica Crowley, Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, former House Oversight Chair Jason Chaffetz, Fox News contributor, and Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein is a former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton. Jason, I got to start with you. Former member of the House of Representatives, Maxine Waters' comments, a non-apology apology this morning at 9 a.m. on radio. I called for her censure on the floor of the House of Representatives. Where do things stand tonight?
No, if you impugn the integrity of another member, if you're inciting violence like that, she should be censured. And I'm glad you brought that up. I think that is very appropriate. Make members of the House of Representatives vote on whether or not they think it's acceptable what she's doing and what she's trying to do. Because this is the face of the resistance movement. It is violent. It is vulgar. It is a scorched earth philosophy, and it is going to lead to violence unless the rest of the body stands up and say this is not acceptable.
Richard.
You know, Jason just said, and you said earlier, someone might get hurt. Donald Trump at a rally during the campaign said, punch him in the face. And guess what? We saw that video of somebody walking up the steps and getting punched in the face. Somebody got knocked over, driven over, and murdered in Charlottesville because they were a racist protesting or taking issue with the protesters in Charlottesville. So people have gotten hurt from uncivil behavior. And I think for people who were Trump defenders to stand up in behalf of somebody who mocked the disabled, you know, go down the list, derided a Gold Star family, the list goes on. For them to call out somebody else for being uncivil is a bit much. Look, Maxine Waters is not the face, much as you or others might want to make it, of the Democratic Party. When Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high, I think that stood for where Democrats wanted to be. Well, I'm just saying, the problem is that position lost. Yeah. So I don't blame somebody like Maxine Waters kind of taking the position she did.
Yeah, I think everybody's rhetoric needs to come down a little bit. I agree with you on that. I really do. And I think we all can do better. There are many Democrats, however, who have supported Maxine Waters. Let's watch a few of them.
Do you wish she hadn't said it?
What was that?
Do you wish she hadn't said it?
She has the right to say what she feels, and I support it.
Yes, if I saw an administrator in out and about, there's nothing wrong with confronting that person.
He doesn't even know how to refer to a staffer. Monica, look, Trump can get pretty heated sometimes, so I think Richard has a point there. But you have a sitting congresswoman from represents a part of L.A. that's seen the L.A. riots. Remember, that was where she really, cut her teeth. Her claim to fame was 1992. I went back and watched that today. She said, push back on them, Monica. Turn on them. Harass them so they can't go into public. Turn on them. Push back on them. That's not debate them. Play fun with them. That was different. A crowd surrounding an individual with her children or with her family members, that's a different deal.
Yes, and we are so far beyond normal politics, Laura, that sometimes it's difficult to see what's really happening. But let's be really clear. The left is at war. The left is at war with the Constitution, with the rule of law, with free market economics, and with our very values. So they are fighting this war 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now they are in a position where they are losing both on politics and policy. So they are resorting to these tactics of reaching for the most extreme rhetoric and the most extreme activity to try to divert attention from the fact that their agenda has failed and continues to fail. The president's agenda, the conservative agenda, is in fact winning. But the fact now, we have to understand that we are engaged in this war, whether we want to fight it or not. The Alinsky tactics, the Cloward and Piven tactics of overwhelming the system, whether it's at the border or elsewhere.
Well, they want anarchy. The anarchy is their friend, correct?
Absolutely, and it's about destroying the system so they can rebuild it in their sort of radical model.
I would say, Jason, also flooding the border is a way. I mean, you got a lot of old voters. Got a lot of old, tedious, old, clunky voters you got to replace with new voters. I really believe that's always been a strategy of the left. The Chamber of Commerce types love the cheap labor, but they love to flood the border, flood the zone, whatever you want to call it, with new voters, new people. They don't like the old people in the United States. They voted for Trump, for goodness sakes. But, Jason, the president tonight spoke out about Maxine Waters. I want to watch here.
They're only good at one thing. What's their term? Resist. It's the party of Maxine Waters. Do you believe her? No. This has become the party of Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi.
Well, look, Chuck Schumer came out today and tried to distance himself. I think he saw where this was going. Even Nancy Pelosi tepid criticism. But she did have her supporters out there, and even in the media, a lot of never-Trumpers hate Donald Trump, anything that could throw a wrench into his plans. But Trump's not letting this go. Should he let it go, Jason? Should he just focus on the substance, let Nancy Pelosi implode?
No, look, this is much deeper than anything that's happened in the last week. The Democrats, their minds exploding because Donald Trump is not only garnering more support and has more public support than a lot of previous presidents have, at this point in his presidency, but his policies are working. Look at all the economic indicators. Look at what's happening overseas. And this so-called, big wave that was going to hit us in the 2018 election, that's not happening. And the only thing they're left with is this desperation of yelling, screaming, taunting people, and it's not productive.
Jason, listen, the reason that Democrats' heads are exploding is because it shocks the conscience to see babies in these metal fences, cages. Call them what they were. That's what shocks the conscience.
Don't do that.
Monica talked about violating the Constitution.
Where were you in 2014? Where were you in 2014 when I introduced an asylum reform bill that passed out of that? I passed a bill out of the Judiciary Committee in March of 2015. Go back and read it. Democrats were nowhere in support of that bill. It talked about accelerating the reunification of children and their parents. Where were the Democrats? I didn't have a single Democrat come and support us to do that bill. Democrats were nowhere. They didn't care about it.
68 senators voted for an immigration reform bill not all that long ago. A lot of Republicans.
I think even Jay Johnson, I thought it was interesting that he came out over the weekend and said, we did do what we did. We did do what we did because they were seeing everybody. Same thing we're seeing now. They were seeing an absolute overwhelming of our borders. And we have limited resources and a limited amount of people. Can't process 50,000 people in 3 months. It's really hard to do that. So, here was a moment of candor from Jay Johnson, but everything's got to calm down. Everything's got to calm down. The Democrats have to calm down. And this violent rhetoric has got to go. Great panel, guys. Mark Meadows reveals how Congress is squeezing the DOJ and FBI. Next.
We had long deployments in Iraq. Really grateful that USA was able to take care.
There's a part of that story that has not been told. You're going to be the first to hear it. Sarah and her husband just went home. They had sort of had enough. But the rest of her family went across the street to a different restaurant. The owner of the Red Hen,
South Carolina,
because nobody's told this, then followed them across the street, called people and organized a protest, yelling and screaming at them from outside the other restaurant.
All right, on this night, the left is on the verge of an emotional break.
And targeting them in public. It's become the new tactic of the left. It's not enough to malign them for their beliefs and positions. Now they have to be publicly humiliated, including their families and, you bet, their small children. Incidentally, Huckabee's in-laws, I love this, are liberals. They don't even like Trump. Hollywood is getting in on the action, too. Actor Seth Rogen, he bragged on TV how he recently embarrassed Speaker Paul Ryan in front of his children.
And he said, can I have a picture with you? And I look over and his kids are standing right there expectantly, clearly fans of mine. And I said, no way, man. And I couldn't stop. And I said, furthermore, I hate what you're doing to the country at this moment. And I count the days till you no longer have one iota of the power that you currently have. And I look over and his kids are still standing right there.
Nice guy. I always get him mixed up with Jonah Hill for some reason. But if I were Seth Rogen, I'd be trying to keep every fan I could. He's not exactly Chris Pratt, but I digress. By the way, even the Cineplex isn't safe from the bullying tactics of the left. Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, she attended a showing of Mr. Rogers, a documentary which, ironically, is all about civility. All right, getting the runaround from the FBI and DOJ, Devin Nunes went straight to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, today. Nunes had given the agencies a 5 p.m. deadline to turn over key documents in the Russia and Hillary Clinton investigations.
I would say we cleaned up most of what was on the table, except for the most important piece. Did you or did you not run informants into the Trump campaign, especially before the investigation even began? Very simple question. It deserves a very simple answer.
Well, the FBI responded late tonight saying they've already responded to Nunes's request. Ooh, Congressman Mark Meadows joins us now to respond. That just happened, apparently, Congressman. So you guys got all the documents you're entitled to.
Well, the one good thing that the FBI and DOJ is very good at is creative writing. Anytime that you would suggest that we have all the documents, when we have tens of thousands of documents that have not been delivered, as we speak right now, we have a valid subpoena that has not been really responded to appropriately, and it's 97 days and ticking. And so for them to suggest that we have everything is just factually incorrect.
Kevin Kleinsmith.
Yes.
Tell us about Kevin Kleinsmith.
Well, obviously, Chuck Ross did.
We need our own deck of cards.
Yeah, you got all these different.
Just to identify them, not for anything, but just to identify them, because there are lots of cast of characters.
Well, you've got
it's like the Love Boat
you've
here.
Got Sally Moyer. You've got all these different individuals. There is one common theme, and it's called bias. Bias against this president.
He's FBI. He was FBI
attorney
number,
and he was actually attorney number 2.
Attorney number 2.
We believe.
In the IG report.
Chuck Ross, the IG has not confirmed that. That's what we suspect. But Chuck Ross did some great reporting today and said that actually he was the one that was interviewing Papadopoulos. And so here you have someone who was key to opening the investigation in this whole Donald Trump Russian collusion narrative that never happened, and yet you've got someone with inherent bias that has started. It's just extremely troubling.
Now, Kleinsmith, like Moyers, is evidencing bias through various text messages that were released.
Right. I mean, a lot of text messages. So it's not just the text messages. It's the fact that they were key components of an investigation that Peter Strzok was involved with. So it's all of them coming together with, not one, not two, but 5 people that were biased against this president and yet initiating the very investigation. So here's the interesting thing, Laura. What we've got to do as a country is become transparent. Give us the documents. Let us put them out to the American people. Let them judge for themselves what is right and what's wrong. It's time. I've said this before. The DOJ and FBI has an opportunity to either be part of the cleanup crew
What's going on with Jeff Sessions? Because he was on our show last week and he seemed to say, okay, we're working on getting these documents. And
well, Jeff doesn't know.
What's going on? Is he not aware?
Well, he's recused himself.
Oh, that's right, he's recused.
But he's really recused himself from any knowledge of what's going on. And so Rod Rosenstein knows better. I mean, he really does know better, and the buck stops with him. And I can tell you that we're going to have floor action this week, Laura, this week on the House floor, where we compel them to turn over those documents.
So just so people know, Kleinsmith is the one who wrote Vive la Resistance.
Well, that's what, if he is indeed attorney number 2, which we believe that he is.
Maybe this is a really dumb question, but why is it that we can't identify attorneys working for them? I mean, they're not exactly undercover agents working in.
You've hit the nail on the head. Actually, they're not part of the counterintelligence division,
which they were trying to pass them off.
Which they were trying to say with the IG. They're actually part of the general counsel's office, and so an attorney working for the FBI normally is not an undercover operation, and certainly wasn't here.
News tonight that Eric Prince's computers have been seized and so forth. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think
former Blackwater CEO.
So what you see is Bob Mueller continuing to grab information and collect information. By the way, you got 1.2 million documents from Donald Trump in 90 days, and yet they can't turn over 50,000 documents to Congress in 9 months. There's a problem.
What's next for Nunes after the 5 p.m. deadline? They didn't give him anything. Said you got everything. What's next?
Well, I think the next thing is for floor action for all of us. Where
Ryan will do that.
Well, if he made a promise to Jim Jordan and I last week that said if we didn't get all the documents by Friday, that we would see floor action this week. I'm waiting for him to follow through on that commitment. But if he doesn't, we have appropriate.
He will. He's a man of his word. He'll follow through.
We're going to count on
pressure on him.
We're going to count on that this week.
Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. Another deadline has passed. Let's get reaction now from former Attorney General Mike Mukasey. General Mukasey, Judge Mukasey, it's great to see you. You just heard from the congressman. I mean, this is wild. The Justice Department said you've received all the documents essentially you're entitled to. Where are we tonight, Judge?
Well, I haven't seen the subpoena, and I haven't seen the documents. So I'm a little bit in the dark about where we are. But it's not an impossible task to turn over documents. I think they ought to do more discussing between and among themselves than posturing publicly.
Well, it looks like the documents Nunes requested were about informants placed inside the Trump campaign or who approached the Trump campaign. I think part of what he's trying to determine when this investigation really began, because they were saying that this investigation into the Trump possible collusion began at the end of July 2016. But indications are that it began really in the spring of 2016. State Department very well involved, Christopher Steele in that dossier, in and out of the halls of justice and perhaps the State Department. So I think that's what they're worried about, that who was really running this investigation and who gave it the impetus, Judge, from the very beginning.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. That's what we really need to know, is when it started and how. And to the extent that there was, I'm interested, for example, in knowing how this informant, who started out as a CIA asset, suddenly became an FBI informant. You know, those two organizations don't really play with each other's toys. And I don't understand how that happened, who brought it about, who paid him, what he was told about his responsibility in going into the Trump campaign, and when that happened. That is something that I think we ought to know. And if there were any others, obviously we ought to know that as well.
Judge, something I just asked Congressman Meadows about the failure of the Inspector General to reveal who these staff attorneys are at Justice. And again, it looks like one of them, Mr. Kleinsmith, was writing unbelievable text messages that he was so depressed after the election. He was stressed and depressed and basically saying the resistance lives on. He's involved at the heart of this investigation, along with Strzok and, of course, Moyers. But we're not revealing who these people are? Why? Well, they're not undercover agents.
Obviously not. And I think that even more significant, at least to me, is not just the statements about the resistance, but rather a set of messages that passed between Strzok and his friend the night that Donald Trump got the nomination, where she wrote to him, "This is unbelievable that Trump has gotten the nomination." His response was, "Yeah, this increases the pressure to terminate MYE," which was the code name, mid-year exam, for the Clinton investigation. That's not just an expression of opinion. That is a statement about how we ought to do our jobs. And that, as on my reading, was not in the IG report. I don't recall seeing it. And that's something I think they ought to question Strzok about when he testifies.
And Judge, he was just walked out of the DOJ last week. Apparently he just lost his security clearance. I mean, that's what Jeff Sessions said. Well, he just lost his security clearance. Someone who is an advocate, a political advocate, running 2 critical investigations as a lead investigator. I mean, I never worked at DOJ. I worked at White House and transportation, education, but Supreme Court. But I never worked at DOJ. But if that's the way business is done at the DOJ, these high levels, we're in big trouble in this country. Big trouble.
Well, it certainly doesn't inspire confidence, nor does something that was reported in the IG report, namely that there were FBI agents in contact with the press who were getting free meals, free tickets, and other perks, and that there were so many of them, they couldn't tell who had leaked information. Now, that was an absolute jaw dropper. The notion that FBI agents were getting compensation, essentially, from reporters and developing relationships with them.
Yeah, cozy.
That should have been a firing offense.
Judge, thank you so much. We're going to debate the left's dangerous flirtation with political violence after the break.
Honey, what is that?
I got you that table runner you wanted.
Sometimes names can be confusing. At Overstock, our name makes people think we sell overstocked goods. But it's actually everything you see here. Overstock has beautiful new furniture and the latest in home trends. So check us out and see for yourself. Overstock.com, where quality costs less.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow be...
Oh, tonight we welcome back the return of our Arbiter segment. Isn't that fun? We discussed the dangers of the left's lurch from political dialogue toward physical confrontations in tonight's angle. But other questions linger. Did the Red Hen restaurant violate the rights of White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders when it kicked her out? And did Congresswoman Maxine Waters illegally incite leftists to commit violence? Here to debate both of these issues, attorney and former Georgia State Rep LaDawn Jones and political analyst and Washington attorney Gail Trotter. Okay, Gail, you have the floor. What possible cause of action could Sanders have against this restaurant?
Yes, the restaurant violated Sanders' rights because they discriminated against her in service under the Virginia Human Rights Act, which does not allow places of public accommodation to deny service to people based on their personal beliefs.
So that would include political beliefs.
It doesn't say specifically, but the statute specifically says that it should be interpreted broadly, and other states, including D.C., right where we are, say that political beliefs, sources of employment, where you live, where you work, cannot be held against you in denying service.
So this is a civil cause of action. What kind of damages? Like treble damages, punitive, compensatory? What do you got?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, if there were leftists trying to put this in force, they would try to put this business out of business, as we've seen in other situations.
The Washington Post, LaDawn, said no cause of action here, even though they didn't. A lot of these civil rights attorneys weren't applauding this action, said Sarah Sanders is out of luck. What's your thought?
I agree. I also don't applaud the action, but I don't think there's a cause of action there. Our legislatures in Virginia or anywhere else have to make it very clear that they do not allow discrimination based on political beliefs. They will have to prove in this cause of action to be successful that this location, the Red Hen, always stop people with these particular personal beliefs or political beliefs rather than just Sarah Sanders herself. And because this was targeted directly at her and for her participation with the Trump organization, I don't think that they could win here.
I disagree. The comments that the restaurant owner made specifically said that they were denying her service based on her personal beliefs. And when you look at those particular statements, they would be entered into evidence as completely exonerating Sarah Sanders and making sure that the restaurant had discriminated against her. And even if you go to the point saying that Virginia statute only allows places not to discriminate based on religion, certainly in immigration, religion has come into this over and over again. People on both sides have been citing Bible statutes, talking about this, and saying that definitely this is a religious issue as well.
LaDawn, do you know? Yeah, go ahead. You can respond to that, and then I'll give you the next point.
You know, I just find it interesting that when we talk about these causes of action, we've seen these cases come through the Supreme Court. We've seen these laws come through several states where there were direct things that our laws have prohibited based on race, religion, sexual orientation, that conservatives have fought very hard to try to say that, well, it's okay for someone to express their personal beliefs for religious reasons. It did not fly in those cases. It will not fly here.
All right, this is Maxine Waters on Saturday versus Maxine Waters tonight or today. Let's watch.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome. I have not called for the harm of anybody. This president has lied again when he's saying that I called for harm to anyone. This Don the con man will say anything. He is the one that's responsible for promoting violence.
LaDawn, she says, push back. Obviously, the import of that is drive them out. She's urging people to surround members of the administration when they're having a private dinner with their children. Doesn't matter. How is that not ultimately inciting people to violence? And she says, no, that's not what I intended. But you're telling people to harass other people. She's a smart woman. She knows what the word harass means, does she not?
I'm sure she does, but let's look at the legal sense of the word. What do we have the right to do as Americans? One of the fundamental rights is to be able to
not
use
incite
our
violence,
freedom of
LaDawn. Not incite violence. You don't have the right to do that.
To incite violence. She did not ask them to incite violence. She asked them to push back on their policies.
She didn't say on their policies. No. She did not. I listened very closely 4 times.
Push them out of a store. She
No,
also
no,
did not say
said
push them out of the
wherever they
store.
go.
She also
Gas
did not say
stations,
drive them over with a car.
Are they public accommodations, though? Those are public accommodations. They're according to the statute, they're public places of gathering. So you have free association, Gail. Look, I think it's a tough call on this, but she has free association as a person, Sarah Sanders. She can freely associate with anyone she wants and go anywhere she wants, but this is a private establishment. So does the private establishment have the right to say, we don't want to serve you if you're barefoot, we're not going to serve you if you're a member of the Trump administration?
Well, there's no question when you're talking about what Maxine Waters said, that this is inciting, and the First Amendment does not protect incitement of violence. And she wants mob rule, and she's talking about a specific action against people whose names we know, 23 members of the cabinet, 6 of them are Republican women.
Create a crowd, push back on them, and tell them they're not welcome anywhere. I think if those words were used against any other class of people who happen not to be related to Trump or supporting him, I think the left would have a huge problem. They have a lot of creative liberal lawyers who would say, oh, well, there could be cause of action, maybe a conspiracy to deprive someone of their First Amendment rights. But this is a good arbiter segment. You were both really good. I don't know. Can I have a tie? No, I can't. Okay. I think Gail has it this time. I don't have my gavel. Gail, you have it this time. But no, it's not of course. I said it was really good, and I want you back. You're both great. Thank you so much for joining us. And the Bible has been used to both attack and defend the president's immigration policy. So what's the truth? An important debate with a panel of distinguished religious leaders next. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Remember in 2009 when President Obama, he was speaking at Notre Dame, said this about the need for civil discourse?
As citizens of a vibrant and varied democracy, how do we engage in vigorous debate? How does each of us remain firm in our principles and fight for what we consider right, without, as Father John said, demonizing those with just as strongly held convictions on the other side?
Oh, what a nice sentiment. But where is he tonight? What does he say about the threats against the Trump administration? Somehow the Dems went from hope and change to nope and deranged. Over the weekend, the owner of a Lexington, Virginia eatery, probably heard about it, called the Red Hen, did something pretty incredible. She asked White House spokeswoman, press secretary Sarah Sanders and her family to leave the restaurant simply because she works for Trump. Well, the owner of the Red Hen, Stephanie Wilkinson, told the Washington Post, I have a business and I want the business to thrive. This feels like the moment in our democracy when people have to make uncomfortable actions and decisions to uphold their morals. So Miss Morality walked Sarah Huckabee outside and told her the Red Hen has, quote, certain standards that I feel it has to uphold, such as honesty, compassion, and cooperation. And she invited Huckabee to leave, which the White House press secretary did. Now, Huckabee returned home with her husband, but the rest of the family went to another restaurant across the street. Well, that didn't stop Wilkinson or her crusade to drive conservatives, apparently from establishments, even ones she doesn't run, in the same town. Interesting among Christian leaders over immigration. So let's discuss that now with a pair of very distinguished religious leaders. I'm delighted they're both with us. Dr. Darrell Scott of the President's Faith Advisory Council and Dr. Kent Engel, president of Southeastern University. Great to see you both. All right, Dr. Engel, let's start with you. You're actually, I think, a supporter of the president's, but you disagree with this policy that initially at least separated families, child in one area, parents more in a formal immigration detention. Why?
Well, sure. Well, I appreciate President Trump's leadership, and he's trying to do the right thing. He wants to uphold the laws of the land. There's no doubt about that. I think the issue there was to not only provide protection, which is what he wants to do as it relates to borders, but I think also the issue has to, you have to look at compassion. How do you bring the human element into this situation so that you can provide human dignity and respect and care and compassion and provide an element that gives both? And I think that's the thing that a lot of Americans are hoping that our president will step up in a way, along with the Congress, the House, the Senate. Our leaders will do the right thing and provide that protective and compassionate pieces to this legislation.
Pastor Scott, this is Bishop Michael Curry, who was just slamming Jeff Sessions for invoking the Bible. Let's watch.
For a Christian to quote Romans 13 over Jesus of Nazareth, as if Jesus of Nazareth doesn't exist, that it seems to me is highly problematic, and it's just flat out wrong. It's unbiblical, it's unchristian, and it's un-American.
Pastor, well, your reaction to that, and I have something to say about welcoming the stranger. Go ahead.
Well, listen, it's not unreasonable to refer to scriptures, especially if you're a Bible believer. It's not unusual to refer to scriptures as a basis to validate any actions that you engage in. Once again, if you're a Bible believer, we oftentimes use scripture to confirm or validate actions or activity that we engage in. I don't see anything wrong with Jeff Sessions utilizing that scripture, because that scripture simply says to obey the civil authorities. Notice something: Jesus nor the Apostle Paul never endorsed sedition or rebellion or violent uprising against Rome. And in using that scripture, he was saying that in order to advance our cause, violence is not the way. Obey the laws of the land so they won't have a reason to accuse us for any wrongdoing. Obey the laws of the land and put other matters into the hands of God, and he'll work it out.
Pastor Engel, the Bible calls on us to welcome the stranger, and it's very powerful. Welcome them to your table. If someone, invite a stranger to your home for meals and so forth. But the Catholic bishops seem to take that to mean open borders. I mean, they got a really big wall around the Vatican. It's a beautiful wall, really nice wall. But that means anyone who steps foot over the border has to be processed into the country and released. How is that welcoming the stranger according to biblical text? That does not mean to be devoid of all laws of the land, does it?
Absolutely. And I go back to that passage the Attorney General referred to in Romans 13, talking about, obey the laws of the land. When you talk about the context of God's law is always for protection. It's always for peace. It's always for harmony. And so that's why when you look at the issues that we are facing with immigration reform, all the issues, challenges that we have seen over the last couple of weeks, you have to have a come together approach that covers all the issues of, you have to look at the issue of collaborating on providing security at the wall. You have to look at issues of compassion as it relates to bringing families together.
We all do what we can to donate to organizations that help people on the ground in their home countries. I mean, so many Christian organizations, faith-based groups in Guatemala, Central America, South America, Africa, around the world. That's where we as individuals can make a difference through our faith, through our churches and our organizations, correct? It doesn't mean that we have to completely smash our own rule of law and say, okay, you have a really sad life. I understand it's horrible. So we have to allow you to come into the country no matter how you come in. But I want to play something for you. And I want to get Pastor Scott on this. This is a very liberal priest known as Father James Martin. He's not a big fan of Trump, to put it lightly. This is what he said.
No one wants to be a refugee. No one wants to be a migrant, but they do it out of great love for their families. They have a lot of guts to do it. And I think it's up to us to welcome them. I think the problem with a lot of these Christians who are saying that they're reading the Bible is I don't know what Bible they're reading, because the Bible I read has Jesus always reaching out to those who are on the margins, including and most especially migrants and refugees.
Well, Pastor Scott, a lot of Americans feel like they're on the margins. Like 2 blocks from where we're broadcasting from, there are a lot of homeless on the street, literally 2 blocks from where we are. Your comments on Father
listen,
Martin.
There's a difference between migrants, refugees, or illegal immigrants. The parents of these children know that they are committing a crime when they endeavor to sneak into this country. This country has a zero tolerance policy. They know that our president is hardline in regards to that, but they tried to sneak in anyway. Now, anyone, an American citizen, regardless of your race, creed, or color, if you are engaged in the commission of a crime and you are caught in the commission of this crime and you are apprehended and you have a child in your custody, that child is going to be removed from your custody and placed in the child services until either somebody comes and gets them or they're remanded over to whatever. And so I don't understand why we're taking any culpability for this crime that is being committed away from the parents and making it as if we're just grabbing kids and putting them in a concentration camp, because that is not the case at all. There's a crime being committed. The children are in the custody of the criminals.
And it's Donald Trump's fault. And it's Donald Trump's fault that a crime is being committed.
Because you told yourself, I'm going to sneak into America. I'm going to sneak into America despite the law, and I'm taking my child. I wouldn't even put my children at risk like that. I have grandchildren. I wouldn't even try to do that if I knew it was a zero policy.
A dangerous journey, that's for sure, up through Mexico. Phenomenal segment. Thank you both. And by the way, the greatest hits from the president's remarks at a campaign rally tonight, and my live interview with the man he was there to support, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, next.
Hello, everybody.